Welcome to this report launch by Joana Pedroso, who's written a report on the AI curse, the hidden public costs of the AI magic. My name is Elinor Odeberg. I'm the chief economist here at the think tank Inte. And Joana will start by introducing her report. And I'm very, very glad to have you on board. And you actually pitched this to me at a tax conference in Gothenburg like a year ago, and you were talking about all these public costs related to AI infrastructure, not only physical infrastructure, but also how it's implemented in the public sphere, and how this could constitute state aid. And I was just mesmerized by this, and I was like, you have to write a report, and this is the result. So after your presentation, we will have a panel discussion with Germán Bender, who is the chief of reports, chief analyst. That's how I'm not used to presenting you in English. Chief analyst at Inte, Melanie Rideout, who is AI strategist at the Swedish Red Cross, and Christian Gustafsson, who is advisor for regulatory affairs at Vattenfall. So thank you all for being here, and here you go.
Thank you, Elinor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of writing this report. Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today to talk about this report and have you here in this room. I hope we can have some fun discussing an extremely serious subject, to be honest. But fun because I just think that if I can try to make my work a little bit more motivating and fun, why not? But despite this, it's a serious subject. I started this image here, as I always do in my presentations, and I think it is, as usual, very important to start with it. And it's actually Södermalm there, and I think it sets the tone of the criticism that my report also delivers, which is we have economic activities that are allowed and being developed in our community, but at what costs? And since I decided to, since I've been mesmerized myself with artificial intelligence as a tool, and I've been thinking, wow, what a magical tool suddenly that can reproduce an output in a split of a second. I've been thinking about, but what are actually the terms and conditions here? From a societal perspective, what are the costs? And as a legal person, I have a doctorate in tax law, but I also have a master in environmental law. I have been practitioner in tax law in Brazil, and I also live here in Sweden. So as this person from the legal field, I really thought we should look at this, and using my expertise, state aid, I tried to give some input on this matter. So I started this report thinking I would write mostly about data centers, okay? Because data centers, we have a lot of research out there assessing from a life cycle assessment perspective, what are the data centers' environmental footprint, what kind of resources they need, etc. And then soon I realized, like, no, I actually need to discuss about like the AI system itself, if it could be somehow state aid. And I'll soon give you a hint what is state aid, okay? I suddenly realized, like, I cannot just look at the physical structure, because we also have a digital service here. And from a tax perspective, we know the digital services are taxed in a certain way, while if you have like the movement of materials to build up a DC, we have a different tax rationale. So I included tax decisions as part of my report. And then in the middle of the way of my report, I realized, like, but hold on a second. Tax authorities and other public agencies, they are spending a fortune of taxpayers' money to develop their own systems. And these systems, with taxpayer money, using the taxpayers' money, they will provide a digital service. And if these digital services used only within the tax administration, fine, okay, this is part of modernizing and effectivizing the tax administration or the public administration work. But what if it's not? What if suddenly one agency starts to provide the services to other agencies in the country, and then we're talking about the services that goes beyond that regular public agents' work. So, coming from the state aid background, what is actually the state aid? The state aid here is an European Union law that can change the legality status of a national law. What does that mean? It means that simply that we might have contracts agreements here in Sweden that are lawful from a Swedish point of view. We might have tax imposition here that is completely lawful from a Swedish point of view. But when we look at it from a state aid perspective, it's unlawful because it treats comparable competitors, for instance, differently from the rationale of that system. And of course, this is the fun part of being a lawyer, because as a lawyer, or as a scholar, we're going to look at what is the rationale of the system. How should we be taxing companies in order to decide that we're equally taxing or not? So I look at these 4 cases, 2 DCs, 2 data centers, one artificial AI system as like using to automate it's like tax authorities using the AI system to reach a conclusion. So they're not fully automating the decision, but they're using they're not fully automating the process, but they are using the system to assess the risks of fraud, etc. And then a human goes there and reassess and reach the final decision. And then the final part is about when the governments are then creating the tax system to provide to other agencies, then using also, even in a closed scenario, using that privileged data and the public capital to develop it. So these are the 3 cases. So let me start with the DC. So when we look at the DC here, we don't, like this is obviously an image generated and by an artificial intelligence. So there is also a sort of irony here in this report, because I'm going to criticize, and without it, I wouldn't be able to do the report neither. So the AI magic with the AI curse, okay? And I think it's a point good to note directly here that I think from our reality perspective, I think that AI, and that's how I started my report, is pervasive in the sense that it's here to stay. It changed our reality. It's here to stay. So I'll try to focus my academic work in the feedback that can be constructive for us as a society. Okay, so looking at this fictitious data center, we can see the structures that it may have. But when I was writing the report, that's kind of what I started to think more deeply and more. I was okay, but the land. I wasn't expecting to be so caught up with the idea of the land, the physical space. It's something that really caught my attention. And why is that? It's simply because when I analyzed the Gävle case, which is Microsoft, one of Microsoft's data centers in Sweden, I realized that the space that DC represented was equivalent to 2 Gamla stan. Imagine, let me go back to imagine. This didn't go back. Imagine 2 Gamla stan of this, more or less this. And then, from a legal point of view, I was thinking, I looked at the municipal sales, and I was thinking, when we talk about sale of land, there is a property ownership transfer, right? There is an acquisition. it's in a civil law, actually. It has nothing to do with tax law, although tax law might look at it and tax it, etc. But there is this transfer of a public goods, in this case, the physical space, to a company that in this case is Microsoft, with the size of 2 Gamla stan. And when I was looking at the document, I realized that the entire process is not at all transparent, is not at all open. This entire affair of selling Gävle land was done at closed doors. And I kept thinking, that much space, the size of 2 Gamla stans, being sold to a multi-billion dollar high-tech company at closed doors. So what can I do about it? And I was thinking, because I think that the societal effect of it is, they are immense. So I started looking at it from a state aid perspective, like I told you. So I was, okay, so from a state aid perspective, is there anything here? And then the rationale is simple, is have this land being sold at a market price? Because if it hasn't, that's state aid. That means what? That means that Gävle expend public resources. So think about it, if a land would worth 200 million, and it was sold for 150, it lost 50 million. So, but the tricky part here is like, how do we reach an evaluation like that? Because are we going to include the environmental impact that that land will have, or has it now, or what about the future? How do we really assess the market value of land? What are the values behind it? So there are many questions here. But when we don't know the actual process, how the evaluation was made, which is this case of, it gets extremely difficult, as I found in my report, to reach a conclusion even if it was or not state aid. Because the evaluation was provided, but there was no method. So as a lawyer, we cannot access it. And I noticed around that a lot of DCs, and not only in Sweden, they do have, but in other countries they do have the same kind of process of buying municipal lands, etc. And the politics also use DCs, bringing data centers to the region as a way to modernize the region and to bring labor and development. But the labor is extremely low. And there's a lot of specialized labor too, which means that this specialized labor does not come locally. So we're talking about 2 Gamla stans, an area of 2 Gamla stans, coming to a town to provide very little labor. And so for what? And also from like this state aid perspective, we have Microsoft. When you look at the market itself, the providers, we understand that they are already major market players. So any kind of help here will just make them even stronger in the market. So it's going to be interesting to hear from a bit of electricity company perspective, but when a DC comes into a country, it's not only like build a DC, etc. We have the issue that they are huge consumers of electricity, and often the grid does not support the amount of electricity that they require. So they need to, the grid owner needs to increase and upgrade the grid. And there is also the cost of energy. And I also asked, but who pays for that? Because it shouldn't be us taxpayers. Because if it's us taxpayers who are paying for that, the company is receiving a benefit from our tax system. And that could be state aid too, because that's a clear benefit. And then we also have the issue of water, that most of data centers, they need water to cool down the systems, because they're the computers, they heat up, so they need to be cooled down. So, and that's why the Nordic countries, they have became famously for being very well suitable for DCs, because we have also the cold air outside, which the DCs companies are now using the cold air as a cooling system too. And we also have a lot of water. And then is also like, what's the volume of water, and what are the costs, like how, and also for those who have a more understanding of chemicals and water, chemicals in water. So what is the quality of the water that is also coming out from it? These are multiple layers here that some layers here I didn't even mention in my report, to not make it extremely like long. And then this is like a good take, because in the Nordic countries, because we have cold weather, that means that we can use the heating that the computers generate when they are processing to warm up the households or even industries. This heating in the Nordic countries is a form of energy that has a market price. But we have to understand that the heating produced by the DCs to be distributed to the community, even though it's a benefit, who is going to pay for the distribution grid there? And because again, if it's we taxpayers that are paying that, the company is receiving a benefit. So that's the entire rationale. And this is not only, you can think about this kind of issues in any data center around the Nordic countries. So I put a question here because I thought, like, what are really the broader societal impact of selling vast areas of land, like the permanent effect, and granted privileged infrastructural conditions to global tech giants such as Microsoft or Apple? I'm not going to answer this. I will leave these questions in the air. If I may, move a bit to the cases of using artificial intelligence system. So here, I need to wrap up, I think, right? So here is...
You have like 5 minutes.
Okay.
More.
So here we have I couldn't find necessarily a concrete case to discuss state aid, because state aid is about, we focus on companies, we don't focus on individuals, because from a tax law perspective, individuals, we receive help from the state all the time, and that's in the logic of we pay tax, we get benefits. So those barnbidrag, etc., those are benefits, those are state help, but they are not caught by the rule because we're not companies, we're not competing, we're individuals receiving benefits from the welfare system. So I couldn't find yet, but they will come, a case specifically about using the artificial intelligence system in like for a risk assessment and analysis of corporate taxation to discuss here, but I decided instead to let's take a very infamous case and discuss here instead. I don't know if you heard about in the Netherlands there was the case of the family allowances, child allowances, where they used this automated systems to make risk assessment, and then 79,000 families were selected by the system for scrutiny, for further scrutiny. And then you think, it's not an issue. We have the EU Act rules giving, setting out legal standards there, so it will reduce the risks that some kind of bad thing happens with those people that are scrutinized. But the thing is, first of all, tax decisions are not considered high risks system use, so we fall in this gap. And second is that the impact of, we understood with the Netherlands case that even though we have humans assessing that the AI system selected as a risk assessment. Like, you need to look at this further. Those humans tend to follow the conclusion of the system. So there is some interesting research coming up in that regard also that made me mesmerized. So we think that having a human oversight will guarantee justice, but in fact, human oversight is just going there and confirming what the machine has done. And in this case, the machine was selected nationality as one of the criteria, and this is discrimination. And from a EU law perspective, this is forbidden. And discrimination from a state aid law, because from a EU law is forbidden, from a state aid law is also forbidden. So I discussed in this case that if we understand that we can reach a discriminatory effect, then we also understand the state aid possibility here. Yeah, I forgot to change this, the slides. So I was thinking for this presentation, like, so suddenly it became our fate as taxpayers and active civilians to become auditors of the tax administration AI system. Like, I love the Swedish expression, vad jobbigt. Like, think about it. How tough. Like, it's already a lot of work to be active civilian and taxpayer and be active in the community. And now we need to understand how to audit systems and how to question algorithms so we understand algorithms' bias. I'll leave you with that instead. So, last case, then giving you a better grasp. So now we have, if we have a public agency that is, even if they have a closed system protecting the personal data, they have access, like Skatteverket, the Swedish National Tax Agency, they have access to privileged data. They have access to company data. And then when they create the system to be able to make risk assessments, etc., they are really in a privileged position. And they are using sovereignty power from the idea you have all the right to tax and administrate, to carry out the tax administration work. But you use that alongside with the public money to create that service. But then when we look around, there are a lot of tax companies like PwC and Deloitte, I think they're creating their own systems. But they don't have that huge amount of data. They don't have, they need to use their private capital. And they are also trying to provide a system that will give risk assessment. And then suddenly we have a tax authority system competing with a private company system. So if the tax authority becomes a private actor, that's to state aid. Or could be to state aid. So finalize here is like, how are we taxpayers benefiting from the public agencies spending public money on artificial intelligence system? How is this benefiting us? Because let's not forget the tax agencies, they are here to benefit us as taxpayers. Like somehow, of course, we're gonna have political discussions in that sense. But I listed here some of my concerns in terms of that. Like democratic, electricity justice, if we have shortages, labor, like this system that our tax agency is even developing, it will take jobs, probably reduce the jobs opportunities. And there are many more. So I won't take more time because we would have some time for discussion here.
Okay. Thank you, Joana.
Thank you.
Before I welcome up the panel, just a follow-up. So I guess, I mean, we subsidize a lot of industries already. Like we give land to the steel companies for mining, and there are tax subsidies of different kinds. And you're saying we as taxpayers shouldn't be paying for the grid expansion related to data centers, for example. And why is that? Why is this type of industry? Why is it special?
Yeah.
In
So
your view.
I think because the trade-off are really, what is the trade-off here? What's the benefit on the table? Is it the 1 second magic? Like, but what about
the images in your presentation? Right.
You know, like it's so, or what is really the trade-off? Because not enough work. We're gonna, for instance, for those here in Sweden, we have these cold winters, and we know that there are households, for instance, that need to heat up the houses, and they still use electricity, and they still face those huge electricity price in the winter. That is a huge discussion here. And then suddenly we have even the DC compete, like, can an individual even compete with an industry that has a contract agreement with Vattenfall? And in this case, the contract agreement is sealed. I still cannot get access to the contract terms in terms of like what's the price. So there is a security of supply of energy. There is some price agreement there that I don't know, but also that we all know that we all need energy.
Okay, so let's dig into the trade-offs a little bit more in the panel discussion. My second question is regarding this case 3 with the discriminatory effects, because you're highlighting that the state aid legal scrutiny is viable when it comes to companies but not individuals. And when you're presenting this, I'm hearing it's discrimination of individuals due to the use of AI algorithms, but how is it state aid?
So
or why is that even the problem? I mean, it's a very valid concern, but why does it fit into your report?
Yeah, so the idea of bringing the Netherlands case, it was just to show like we have a case with individual, and this is not state aid, but we have a case where individuals are discriminated. So it shows that through algorithms bias, the process of risk assessing can reach that conclusion. So I just thought analogously, if this risk assessment would be about companies and it would reach a discriminatory output, then we'll be talking about state aid, because that is a selective advantage condition. And then the other criteria, they fulfill very...
So basically you're saying if this would be more broadly implemented, if you already
and it is already being broader.
These effects on individuals, it might have the same effects on markets and companies. Okay, great. All right, welcome up, Germán, Melanie, and Christian. And Joana, you can go
that
furthest to my left.
To your left, that way.
So Germán, you can start actually just giving your overall comments on Joana's report. What were your thoughts when you read it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I thought that the report was really interesting. It fills a gap, I think, by connecting the physical material costs of AI to the European Union state aid framework, which I think is a linkage which is missing in the public debate. And once you read it, it seems kind of obvious, and you're kind of asking yourself, how come nobody really talked about this before? I mean, it has been talked about in similar public investments and public aids before, in terms of we had funding for data centers before, which we now don't. We had reduced electricity costs, which we don't have anymore, and we still have it for manufacturing industries. So it's not a entirely new sort of argument, but I've never seen it so fully developed as is in this report. And I like the framing as an AI curse, because it sets the finger on like just a small aspect of a wide range of problems that the AI companies are causing now across the world. And I think the report is also very timely, because especially related to data centers, to AI more broadly, but data centers specifically are causing huge amounts of protests in the United States, and also violent attacks on data centers and on AI company leaders, actually. So it's a report that kind of sheds light on a very timely issue, but does it in a way and formulates a very kind of substantial and intelligent criticism, whereas a lot of the criticism that's around nowadays is more kind of perhaps less developed as this one. So I think it's a very good contribution to the debates. And I have more things to say about specific issues, but those are some overall comments.
Christian?
Thank you. Can share the views given here a bit, that it's a very kind of, this is a big, strong thing that comes into society, and there's a lot of pressure to just jump on the train and make way for it. And I think as such, it's always good to ask the question, do we do this without second thoughts, or do we do this without taking consideration to important values? I represent electricity usage and grid to part. I can't talk about land use or real estate topics. We do own the regional grid in Gävle, so we are by law obliged to do the connection. But maybe we get back to that. But I guess I think from the Swedish perspective that I know well, there isn't any special treatment for data centers energy-wise. They stand in line as everyone else. What makes them different is that they are huge in size and very, very well financed. It's rather, as you said, that actually the traditional industry are subsidized by a tax system, whereas data centers is, I think, 5 years, are again paying full tax. They were exempted earlier, but that has been removed. So actually, I think the development in Sweden isn't alarming yet, in the sense that they are not allowed to cut the line. They need to respect the rule of law as everyone else. But I think it's important that we discuss this, and they are a big force. And whenever they connect or ask to connect to the grid, they start an enormous process. Because if you have, let's take the biggest electricity line you can see, that's 1,000 megawatts, and that's the size of a big data center, which means that you need to redo every calculation of the system once they ask for a connection, which makes them important to talk about from all aspects.
Have you ever said no to?
We're not allowed to say no.
Oh, okay, great. So why do they ask?
So that's by law. We have the obligation to connect any customer that asks to. But they are, maybe we get ahead of discussion here, but they are allowed to ask for a connection. They can ask for a connection on various locations. But the grid owner needs to just say that, let's see how we can do this.
Okay.
And if you're that big, it's going to take a long time to do the math, basically.
And I understand that. I just would like to have the papers disclosed. That's all. So I can scrutinize them as a researcher, and can I actually look if there is any price agreement there that is actually effectively giving a lower kilowatt price per
that's
hour.
a different thing. But that's now maybe we need to take this bit in a wider context. We are obliged to connect them. That's that's the regulated part of it, and then they need to contract electricity, and that's the competitive market, and those contract terms are never shared with anyone.
That's exactly my point. That's a contract with Vattenfall, which is a 100% state-owned company, electric company, and then you have a sealed contract establishing an electricity price. And how can we, as taxpayers, scrutinize that?
But we are a public company obliged to pay dividend to the state, so we don't make poor business decisions.
Right.
And I think the least problem with data center, they have money to pay the market price. So you could discuss. So I think it's a valid question, but I can really assure you that this is something that's done on market terms.
But before we move on to Melanie's comment, just to clarify, so the actual price for electricity that they pay is not public.
No, but
None are.
No, it's
none
not.
Are. Okay, but that's just a good knowledge question. So we don't know what LKAB or any
but you can
company pay.
We don't sign a long-term agreement to deliver electricity.
Sorry, in the mic, so that we
all contracts on power supply contracts over long term, power purchase agreements are agreed at market price.
Okay, but
basically,
is
there's
it
a reference price.
disclosed?
You can say the spot market price or the forward price that you could quote on stock exchange or the electricity market exchange.
Okay.
So
great.
you don't, you this is about the way you hedge a big company. You need to have stability on your revenues, and therefore you sell electricity on forward markets.
Okay.
And that we could do, for example, to Microsoft, but also to LKAB or
Right,
SSAB,
right.
and we don't quote the private contracts with those companies.
Okay. Great.
Sometimes you could say that you sold the volume, and I think you can read in our annual report that we sold like X percentage of our volumes on the forward market at an average price of 52, but not the share that's been given to individual companies.
Okay. Thank you. Melanie, what were your thoughts and your AI strategies at the Swedish Red Cross?
Just very quickly on that point, I worked for a short time with SFRB, which is a district heating plant in South Stockholm. And they were putting together a kind of proposal of how to integrate a data center together with the district heating plant. So exactly what you were talking about waste heat. And they were actually giving preferential rates to the data center. And that was something that probably isn't public. I didn't sign an NDA, or perhaps I did, but that's true. And they were also working together with the municipality to see how they could make it more competitive and more attractive to actually attract data centers. So perhaps that's something for you to look at. And I mean, I can put you in contact with the people that I worked with. Maybe they speak to you, maybe they don't. But also district heating is a bit complex. You can't just collect waste energy from a data center because the heat isn't high enough. So it does need to be integrated into an already existing infrastructural system. And SFRB is state-owned. It's 100% owned. But then there's also the energy market in Sweden. You also have like the municipality ownership. And then each municipality also has to compete with other municipalities for competitiveness. So there's quite complex layers when it comes to this. Gosh, there's so much to say. So maybe for clarification, like my background is environmental science, and I started working in Octopus Energy, actually. So that was when, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're a double unicorn. I was there in the first 50, and part of changing the energy system in the UK. So this is why I know about energy systems. And then ended up working for Forum Civ, and a little bit, a lot in the past. I look young, but I'm actually quite old. Working a lot in, everything from climate justice to emergency operations in all over the world with the Red Cross. Environmental emergency, looking at water systems, chemical-free water plants, like a load of different stuff. So, and now I'm in the Swedish Red Cross doing AI strategy, but from like a sustainability, responsible AI perspective, and trying to also create a bit more of a global movement when it comes to humanitarian principles and technology, which is a resolution that we're looking at. And we are also looking at it from an international humanitarian law perspective, and looking at what are the obligations when it comes both to the European states, but also when it comes to the Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations. We are underneath, we're an auxiliary to the government, so we're not government, we're not non-governmental. We have a special legal status for protection of people and to ensure that we maintain humanitarian services to those who are most vulnerable in our society. Gosh, what to say, really? So I think there's a couple of things when it comes to the Swedish context. Sweden, that there is a lack of public debate. That is absolutely, I have no idea how there is such small public debate. The AI, the Sweden AI policy that came out, the strategy, there was pretty much nothing apart from everyone running around and going, yeah, we need to deliver this, we need to deliver this. Let's remind you, so the Sweden has said they want to become top 10 public administration of AI worldwide. The question of who benefits has never been asked, has never been questioned. It is just 100%, let's just go for this. Let's just go behind this. Sweden signed the Pax Silica. I don't know if many people have heard of the Pax Silica, but they signed that a month ago without public debate and also without disclosing what it means. So the main parts of Pax Silica are secure supply chains. I've put question mark, question mark, question mark. What does that mean? What does that mean for Sweden, especially for the Sami people as well? There was a massive discovery of critical minerals in the north of Sweden. that people have been moved. I mean, we all know that Kiruna has been moved, but then it's also, I mean, Sweden also never ratified the indigenous land rights, which is also very strange, but the reason that they didn't ratify it is because of those critical minerals and because of the Sami rights to that land. And then on top of that, it comes with environmental rights obligations, which Sweden has continuously violated. The second is secure digital infrastructure. Again, question mark, question mark, question mark. What does that mean? What does it mean to secure digital infrastructure? Again, lack of transparency. I would argue that when it comes to public debate and public use of money, that there does need to be a disclosure when it comes to data centers. And we were having a very high-level conversation last week with DigiConnect, looking at a climate-aligned, it's a white paper for a climate-aligned AI policy in the EU. Data centers were discussed. Critical minerals were also discussed. And also, what does digital infrastructure really mean? And why are we investing in it? I think that's the number one question. You're a chief economist. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, Eleanor. We are creating statistical model systems. We are investing 200 billion only in LLMs, 20 billion in data infrastructure. Not even a 0.1% of that is going into mitigation strategies. We also have legal obligations to ensure that we meet net zero, that we don't go into a climate catastrophe. Somehow we have forgotten that we're in a climate catastrophe, and instead we're like, yeah, that's okay, let's put billions and billions of CO2 into data centers, and yeah, who cares about that? Let's just build it. For what? I don't know. Thousands of people are losing their jobs. The amount of jobs that come from this infrastructure have not been proven. The benefits have not been proven. You can read every report from McKinsey to BCG to every agency. Like, these benefits just don't exist. You have to ask yourself, well, I asked myself, this is the biggest PR campaign ever. Seven of the top most rich people in the world, who are white American men, own 100% of the biggest AI companies. They have invested millions. US and probably Swedish and probably many others, because I haven't done enough investigation, have invested loads of our pension money in this. There is a lot riding on money coming back from the investments in these systems. And we are being taken for a ride. We're being told that we have to do this.
Okay, Melanie. So, Melanie, you're basically saying the trade-off is negative for the taxpayers.
I mean,
to conclude,
horrifyingly
bad.
negative.
People losing jobs, not that many jobs created, environmental footprint, etc. But let me ask you, from this report, like from a human rights perspective, what is it? The land use? Is it the potential discriminatory? Like, what is it that would provoke you the most, or that you think is most problematic when it comes to the expansion of AI?
I mean, first of all, the expansion of Sweden wanting to put public administration, like AI, top
so like
10 in the world.
Services.
Yeah. Something that you didn't look at was the Försäkringskassan case that was in 2023, which showed that the algorithm that was used by is Svenska Dagbladet and Amnesty International that did this investigation with Lighthouse reports, in which they found that the algorithm was most likely to flag women, migrants, and people of color as committing fraud. Right. And then it was an indiscriminate. That has not been looked at, that has not been responded to, that has not really been changed by the Swedish government. And now we're going to do that across all public administration. There's another example in the Netherlands where Microsoft hyperscaler actually surpassed a moratorium in which it wasn't allowed to be built, but Microsoft somehow managed to surpass that. And so a hyperscaler is being built just outside of Utrecht. And that means that 50,000 affordable homes can be built and 2 schools. The trade-off is...
Okay, and I stuck with something that you said, Christian, that we just jump on the train, sort of. And it feels like a very Swedish thing to just be like, okay, this new tech development, let's embrace it, let's be top of the class. And there's, German, like, why do you think that is, that we are so positive to new technique, that we maybe don't ask these necessary critical questions? Is it related to our industrial history that I know that you've written a thesis on?
Well, I mean, I agree with most of what you said. Those were well put. Why are Swedes so techno-optimists? I mean, I think we tend to have that kind of mentality in many other issues. Like we're very strong in favor of something or against it, and then we just turn. There are many other examples of this. So I don't rule out that there will come a kind of a backlash against AI as well, and even here. But the technological optimism is kind of special here. But I think it has to do with our industrial legacy and the fact that Sweden is a very, as we usually say, an export-dependent country, which relies heavily on manufacturing industries and has, for at least 100 years, come to realize that it's a really important competitive advantage that we have to support, and that has economic ramifications. So we have, as we mentioned, we have a tax subsidy for electrical energy for the manufacturing industry. We have a broad consensus among unions and employers that the industrial companies should set the pace of wage growth. We have so it's an economic issue, it's a political issue, and I think it's kind of disseminated into wider culture as well. So it's become kind of a norm that we broadly, of course there are exceptions, but we broadly see technology and moving forward with whatever benefits new technologies can gain for us as the way to go for Sweden as a country. So I think it's become kind of deeply ingrained in our culture, and that combined with this huge marketing campaign from the AI companies and the tech sector more broadly makes us really kind of susceptible to this hype, I think. I mean, anytime you raise skeptical questions or kind of eventual or possible drawbacks of these technologies, you're kind of painted out or made out as a bakåtsträvare, like a negative critic, and someone who just wants to go back in time and is negative. What? Yeah, exactly. Or a Luddite, which is an honorable thing to be, actually, I think, but has been cast in shame, because what they actually did, the Luddites, almost 200 years ago, was to fight against technology which was displayed in them, and they weren't not really actually against the technology itself, but the way it was implemented, the way it put people out of jobs and worsened working conditions and pay and so forth. And I see the same mechanisms going on today. So people don't necessarily have to be against the technologies themselves. Like, for instance, you used a lot of AI when you did your presentation, and you write about it in the report that you also used it for writing the report. But you're still critical of certain aspects of the AI technologies as they are being implemented today. So I think those are perfectly reasonable positions to have at the same time. You don't need to necessarily only be a critic or be a kind of full-on evangelist of it. And I think that's a position that's always been possible to have, but it's taken a long time for people to accept it and view it as something that you can actually be. You can be in favor of technologies, but also have a lot of concerns about many aspects of it. And that's something that I've been trying to raise. And if I could just say something about which I thought about when reading the report. I'm not a lawyer, and certainly not an EU lawyer, which seems to be something even more complicated. But so a question to you. So one thing I thought about was that so the kind of the main lens that you look at these different AI technologies, both infrastructure and software systems here, is the European Union state aid regulation. And the concern I have is that if we emphasize that too much, we could also find ourselves in the position that we make it more difficult for states to do things which are actually good to the benefit of society. And as far as I understand, and this is where I'm not a lawyer comes in, there are other articles in the treaty, perhaps 107.2 and 3. I've just quickly Googled this, but that allow the European Union states to make public investments and subsidies which don't fall under the state aid regulation prohibitions. So there are actual ways of doing this. So what I was thinking, so I think if that's the case, that's an important point to make. So the state aid regulations don't become kind of the thing in itself that we care about, because we don't really care about that. What we care about is having regulations that make it difficult to do things that we don't want to happen, not just to observe the state aid regulation because that's just a law. So what I was thinking about is that in my field, in industrial relations and in political economy, there's a lot of talk about conditionalities, which is the idea that states can make investments but put strict conditions on them. So in this case, for instance, you could imagine, and I'm specifically interested in the labor aspects of it, you could imagine that the state would make investments in, building out electrical grids or giving reduced electricity prices or cheaper land or whatever to an AI company, but doing that conditional on so many jobs, or that the grids can be used for public purposes as well. That you could have this is a pipe dream, but we could require collective agreements, for instance, for contractors and so forth. And these conditions are something that some European member states, as I understand it, are better at than Sweden. So we typically don't have those kind of conditions, as far as I know. So would that be possible in the European framework that you used?
I just want to make it, I will boil down this because it can be an extremely complex discussion. The thing is, the trade-off itself, labor versus some sort of benefit, this is not really what will make a measure lawful from a state aid perspective, okay? Because, like for instance, market price is what we used largely in state aid to determine if there was a loss of revenue and so on or not. So if you reduce the market price, you're given a benefit and therefore is state aid. But what we have is a mechanism within the EU that if you want to give a benefit to companies, then you run this with the Commission. And that's a different regime, right? So then Sweden is not fully sovereign here. And that's from a legal perspective change, because no, the states cannot just go there, I'll trade off and give me jobs, I'll give you this, and we're good, because we balance things out. The states need to go to the Commission, notify the Commission under Article 108 of the treaty. There is a procedure to follow. There is even legislations about it to follow. Some legislation is possible to implement directly without notification, but there is a procedure. You can't just do the trade-off. What we can do, if we want to avoid the state aid issue as much as we want, is disclose the documents, open the process, be aware of the effects, discuss the effects, because when politicians discuss the effects on not only on the market, but on the environment, on the society, and they implement this kind of rationale into the decision-making process, then if this would be questioned from a scholar that is a state aid interested, I have to take into consideration those values too, because they have been there implemented, because the internal market is not only economic market, it's a social, it's a political, it's an environmental, it's also a market concerned with protection in war times, So we have multiple values in the internal market, and that's the tricky part. But what I have been doing over and over, and my thesis is also aiming at that, is like, I'm talking with policymakers and telling them, like, I don't want to raise state aid questions to make policymakers afraid about the state aid threat. It's just to make them aware that if you want to have full sovereignty here, we need to have certain debate, so you can legislate, or if you can decide on something based on these values, like a social, an environmental, an economic, and go throughout the process based on these values. And this is the difficulty here, because when you have it at the doors closed, when you have like a price agreements that is not, if it's a market price, what's the problem then to disclose it? Especially when we have, from a European point of view, a huge discussion about data centers not disclosing actual numbers and coming regulations in this regard.
Okay, so just to get some base facts, Christian, because now there's a lot of public debate around, we need to increase energy production, we need nuclear power is a big issue, and for whom are we building this nuclear power? If you could just lay out the land, like how much is of the energy consumption is industry-based, how much is households, and the pressure on the grid, how much is industry?
You could say roughly, but first of all, I think what might not be obvious for everyone is that the electricity consumption in Sweden is the lowest since 1986. So we talk a lot about huge energy volumes being needed to build out, but as of yet, we don't consume any more energy than we did in 1986.
Right.
Roughly, to your question, Laura, I think 1/3 is heavy industry, traditional heavy industry, like steel, paper, traditional Swedish car industry. And 1/3 is household, and 1/3 is the rest. I mean, everything mills, small-sized.
And where do the data centers fit in? We have
mean,
about 40 data centers, right, in Sweden?
But we don't have these hyperscalers yet. They are still under development. I think Gävle is the only, and perhaps to clarify, I think it's clear to you, but what we are doing with Gävle is that we are obliged to connect it. So the contract we refer to is the grid connection, not the sales of electricity. So not the price of anything, it's just the regulated contracts. If you want to connect something to the grid, especially that's big, you need to construct a lot of new equipment. It's like stations, substations. You need to find the connection to, for that size you need to go to the high voltage grid, which is owned by Kraftnät. And all that connection costs are covered for by the customer, by Swedish law. So I think the problem, I think it's important that we talk about this, but let me be very clear, they are not skipping any costs in Sweden. I can't talk about the other countries, but they are, and the problem, they are well financed, so they can take the cost. Sweden has the lowest electricity price in Europe still, or in EU. So the market price isn't a problem either. But it's important that we, and if I dare to say, if you would ask the data center industry about the grid connection, the first answer you will get is that it takes too long and we need to stay in line. So I think that the rule of law in that sense works well so far in Sweden, but of course we need to talk about it because they are asked for massive connections and they stand in the queue, in the line as everyone else. So sooner or later, a lot of the line will be, first in line will be a lot of data centers. But they don't get any preferential treatment as we discuss here.
But they get a supply guaranteed by contract too. And that supply guarantee.
What do you mean with?
When that data centers in general, they get that the company that provides the electricity, and in this case is also Vattenfall, guarantees that it will supply electricity. Even though I know that Sandviken data center seems to have had a problem with Vattenfall not supplying the electricity they needed. There was a news about that lately. But there is like
you talk about the grid connections. I think it's different things here. But maybe we can take
no. But you have the grid connection, and then you have the supply of electricity needed to run the data centers. I understand that you're talking about, okay, we own the grid, but it's also Vattenfall who is providing the electricity to Gävle DC, to the data center there. And they are the electricity suppliers, and they also guarantee they would supply the electricity they needed. And that is obviously a societal issue.
But why is it that? Because that we would do. If you would ask for electricity, I would guarantee the supply for you as well. So I think, and I'm not, honestly, I think they might have different supplies. What you do, you hedge your electricity consumption.
Quick final question, because this was such an interesting discussion, but we're running out of time. So we have all these potential negative consequences and actual negative consequences of AI. We also have, possible positive effects on growth and efficiency, et cetera, and this will be a continued debate, of course. But just like a quick yes or no question, taking all this into account, would it be enough to say, okay, you need to compensate more? Say, you succeed with the state aid case and they compensate for the subsidies they've perceived, or should we like would it be enough to like tax them more for them to give back more to the public sphere? Or are you saying, okay, actually no, this is not worth it at all. It's not worth it because of the environmental footprint, land use, conflicts, etc. So basically my question is, would it be enough to say, okay, compensate more, tax them more, and then continue, or do we need to say this AI expansion is not realistic? We need to pull the brake. German, you first.
Well, there are so many factors to consider, but I think there doesn't seem to be, for instance, any labor gains here, at least in terms of data centers. They don't generate a lot of jobs, and most of the jobs, or at least many of the jobs, come from other places than the ones where they're established. And I don't see, like, they don't add to Swedish innovativeness or any other, benefits to our industries. The only clear advantage that I perhaps see is because we're seeing now a rift between the United States, which is becoming like an authoritarian fascist state. We'll see how long that goes on. But so the European Union has started to realize that geopolitical issues have become salient again. So if there is some value to having these AI infrastructures, for instance, data centers, but there could be other here on our territory,
right,
then that could be a reason to try to keep them here and to have outsized public subsidies for them, kind of making an exception, treating them better than other companies. I'm not saying that's the case, but that could be a good argument for it. However, they're still owned by American companies, so I'm not sure how that's another legal issue. I'm not sure how much sovereignty that would give us over those centers, but that's an issue that could perhaps motivate public investments.
Right. Okay. Christian, and I know you're from
Vattenfall,
and
I
you
don't
have
feel confident or competent enough to answer the broader question. I think they're well raised by colleagues on the panel. But as again, I just repeat, as of today, we don't subsidize them into our electricity system. But of course, you always need to discuss the sheer size of it, if it.
But you highlighted in the beginning of the panel that we removed this exemption of the tax subsidy.
Yeah,
was that a result of this type of critique in the public debate, or why was that subsidy removed?
I don't really recall the arguments, but it was partially removed and then put back again. I think it was a short period of time. That could be checked. But of course, it was always has some arguments about do it create jobs for people. I mean, the argument that it doesn't create that much direct jobs, of course, always raised. Then you can question the dynamic effects of things always. So I can't answer. I don't recall. I need to
maybe that subsidy debate needs to be taken in other industries as well. Melanie, thank you.
Okay, I'll try and wrap it up and.
Yes, short.
Because
we are over time.
Yeah. So I said no.
No.
I mean, also let's talk about the fact that it's not just tax. There's also data, and data today is worth much more than money. There are extraterritorial laws that were passed last year by the US that means that if it is their company and their data center, whether or not it's in Europe, it is under US extraterritorial laws. There are certain things that they have to pass through Congress. There's a debate happening right now between the EU-US data transfer. But since the US has also watered down the EU AI Act, there's an omnibus happening right now. There was an omnibus of CSDD and CSRD, which are the reporting around sustainability. They're probably going to be quite successful in watering that down too. And also the fact that Sweden has signed Pax Silica. So data being sent over to the US, we don't really know what that means, but it can mean a lot of not great things, which I won't talk about right now. That's a whole other debate. But then the question also comes down to like trying to be a bit more positive here about sovereignty, about how do we actually support and use Swedish tax money to support Swedish sovereignty. I was having a conversation yesterday with a company called Verket AI, and they have amazing technology that can, like hardware and physical technology and clusters and inference APIs. If people are tech people, you'll know what I mean. But this would actually be a block for us not to share our data. And they're actually speaking to ministers in Sweden who they say there is actually preferential treatment to big hyperscalers in terms of energy supply to the big, to Microsoft, to Meta, to others. And so they're trying to speak to ministers and say, hey, can you give us preferential energy? Because they're not able to get access to energy for their inferences and for their data centers.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
Joanna, last remark. Would it be enough to if this actually goes?
I would put a handbrake in that, actually, because, like I said, I'm sorry, it's nothing personal, but as a scholar, I would like to get the documents disclosed so I can reach a conclusion that it's not a preferential treatment in terms of energy supply, the price of energy, and hedge contracts, they're usually state aid. And I do think, I start my report saying that I think that data is the new century's gold, tradable today, and we are living in times, and I'm not going to answer this question from a tax law perspective, I'm going to answer this question as a global civilian, because I'm a Brazilian living in Sweden, okay? I think that given our global context today, we do need that handbrake, because these multinationals, we have seen the extraterritoriality of US in Brazil in other circumstances, and I think that Europe is extremely vulnerable to centralize or to have these these American AI tech companies providing the service and having and trying to bridge them here physically. I understand the rationale, don't take me wrong, but perhaps the way forward, and the Commission is already arguing that it's a smaller scale of AI service providers and platforms and etc. and try to be perhaps more local and less American centered.
All right. Thank you so much for such an interesting report and such an interesting discussion. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for those who have listened.
Thank you.